Have you ever painted one of these beautiful cardinals before? I'm really excited to take you through step by step how to paint this beautiful bird. I'm using colors from Daniel Smith watercolors. The colors I'm using are New Gamboge, cadmium red medium hue, and pyrrole orange. You'll also see me drop in other colors like lavender and a touch of neutral tint later on. But right now I'm painting wet on dry. I am working my way from the top of the bird down through the chest, into the feathers, and down to the tail. From top to bottom, we are going to cover this beautiful bird with lots of beautiful flowing watercolors. I am bringing in a cool color, and that color is lavender. If you have cool colors in with your warm colors, it just jazzes up the color, and it also suggests a possible shadow in there. I'll be using that lavender in my background to tie all my colors together. I'll even use it in the log that the cardinal is standing on. I love bringing in that new gamboge, that warm yellow, in with my reds and my orange. It just livens up the color and almost makes the colors glow. So if you don't have new gamboge, you could use granacridone gold. Maybe you have a warm yellow in your mix. Just bring it in now and then, and don't bring it in shyly. Bring it in with some boldness. Now and then I'll mix a creamier mix of the paint so it'll go darker. And here I'm using granacridone rose with some of my cadmium red as a mixture. It just takes it a little deeper. I worked my way down the chest of the bird, and it's time to bring in a little bit more lavender. So I've got those warm and cold colors working for me. As I go into the tail section, I'm transferring back into the orange, the pyrrole orange. And I could have just skipped the lavender, but look how that almost vibrates in there. Those colors next to each other are so exciting. Let's see, here I'm adding some Rose of Ultramarine to my red mix to take it a little bit deeper, because going into that tail, we have a deeper red. Now I'm going to add a little bit of neutral tint to my red because I want to take it a bit deeper or darker. Neutral tint looks like black, but it's actually a wonderful mixer that you can add to any of your colors to create a darker version of it. Notice all the variation of color, both on the breast of the bird and in the wings. I'm constantly working on changing the color up, changing the value. You can adjust the value by either adding more water or more paint to the mix. The brush I'm using is the Dynasty Black Gold 311 Quill, and this one is probably the 0 or the 2. It's got a really nice point and it holds the water beautifully. Now that I've got my first layer on there and it's dried, I can come back and intensify some of the color by adding on another layer. You don't want to do this everywhere. Maybe pay attention to where you've got more intense color versus more light. And you can adjust this very carefully. To emphasize the head feathers, I'm just going to go in with a little bit of my color and do a touch of brushwork up there. And I can also do a little bit of detailing on the feathers down below. I think the key here is to not overdo it. It's almost better to underdo your painting. We so often go too far and then it becomes overwork. So my goal is to keep you from going too far and to just have you think about suggesting the cardinal rather than doing a complete painting. For my rich, deep, dark black, I am using neutral tint in a milk consistency. I have very little water in my brush because I want to control my line work, especially around the eye and around the beak. Take your time, don't rush. The mask, I like to call it on the cardinal, is something that gives it a lot of oomph or power. And so let's take our time there and with the eye. As I paint the eye, I want to save the highlight in the eye. And so just paint around that. I'm also being careful to save that little circle around the eye, and we'll take care of finishing that off later. My little winter cardinal is just about finished. All I'm going to do is come in with my red mixture and add just a little bit more color here and there, finesse a few edges, and then he's basically done. After that, I'll be going into the background and painting the log, and I have a surprise for you at the end. Yeah, just putting in a few details. I have a tiniest bit of red on my brush, and I want to put a little bit of color on that outside rim of the eye. Okay, I want to put in his little feet or claws or talons. I'm not sure what you want to call them. I'll use the same basic colors that I've got. My rose, my red, my orange, and that lavender. Now, something like that is not important to the painting. In fact, they're not very pretty. So I really just want to suggest that feature. I'm pretty happy with my cardinal, and I need to take a break from that and focus on the stump that he is standing on. I've got my lavender and my yellow ochre, and I'm just going to brush sideways down the trunk and vary the colors as I go. Some of my color has a little texture, so I'm using almost a dry brush, and sometimes it's a little more wet. Here I've added some of my permanent brown into the mix. I'm sticking with similar colors that I have. If I use that new gamboge, it would be way too bright. So watch out for that. I can even bring in a touch of cobalt blue if I want. I'm keeping this very simple and painting it fairly quickly. I may add a few details to it after it dries, but I'm pretty happy with my first attempt, and want you to encourage to minimalize the trunk because this is about the bird, not the trunk. On the top of the trunk, I'm using yellow ochre, Naples yellow, and a touch of titanium. You could always just use one of those colors. I'm going to keep my background very simple. I don't love the beige background that you see with the cardinal, so I'm going to use lavender. That's kind of my surprise color that I've been using on the bird, on the stump, and I think a soft lavender background would be beautiful. First step is to put in a wet and wet wash with clean water and be very careful as you paint around the bird. If you have too much water on there, basically if you picked it up and it all dripped off, you've got too much water. So learning to control that water takes some time, but you'll get there. Now I'm going to add my lavender. I do have a tiny bit of cobalt blue in there, and my goal is to keep that background fairly light, and then I will just work my way around the bird very carefully. The reason you paint wet and wet is so that you can get a fairly smooth background. This helps you avoid the stripes that you might get, and it works really nicely. To get a nice clean edge, sometimes it's easier if you rotate your painting so you can come in at an angle that is comfortable for you. Okay, I want to get some texture onto that stump, and I'd like to gray it back a little bit, so I'll use a little bit of my neutral tint with my lavender, and my paint is pretty dry. It's not really wet as it was the first time through. This is dry brush technique where you drag the brush across the top surface of the paper. And so it doesn't cover smoothly. It covers actually a little roughly. And I'm holding the brush a little bit away from the paper. Then I'll use the point of the brush to add in some details. So I've got my lavender. Now I've added a little permanent brown to the mix. It's all grayed back. I don't want bright colors down here because that would compete with my little cardinal. I do like that warm permanent brown in there, just a little bit here and there to give that stump some personality. Okay, now that my background is very dry, I can go ahead and try stenciling some snowflakes, and I have a couple here to choose from. This is the one I really like because I like the variety of stencils or the variety of snowflakes. And I picked these up at arts and craft stores, just all over the place. Now, what I'm doing is I'm using a Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. It's slightly damp, very slightly damp, and holding the stencil still, then I dab at it with a paper towel, and you can see that stencil pattern on my watercolor background. And I will be doing this in different areas, designing where my stencil snowflakes are going, choosing different sizes. And I'm really excited about the look this is creating. Now, you can use any kind of these plastic stencils. The key is you want to use a clean Mr. Clean with no soap. And remember to barely have any water in your Mr. Clean sponge that you're using. Once it's dirty, you can't use it again. So I will need to go through a few different pieces of my Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. right, at the end of a painting, I just want to fine-tune and finesse my bird. And I don't know what that little round shape is, if he's got a little seed in there or if it's part of his beak. I looked it up, diagrams of cardinal birds, and I didn't see it, but to me, it almost makes him smile. So I'm gently painting around it, and I'm also identifying the line on his beak. This can either make him frown or make him smile. So it's up to you. See, by adding a little bit of neutral tint, I can go a bit darker and finish up that line, which makes part of the beak. I'm going to sign this painting, keep it really simple with this Uniball Signo broad white pen. And there we go. I hope you enjoyed watching the video. If you painted along, I'd love to see you share your painting in one of my online programs. If you aren't in one of my online programs, find out more about that in cindybriggs.com. And just look for the online programs. I also teach for the Smithsonian Studio Arts Program, University of Utah, Go Terracotta, French Escapades. I'm teaching all the time. So I hope you'll join my newsletter list and that we bring you into our encouraging, supportive artist community. Thank you and happy holidays.